Welcome to this episode of Blended, Blessed, and Always a Mess. I'm Aric.
And I'm Angie.
We are married with a ton of kids.
We have 6 kids total. He has 3 and I have 3.
My name's Hallie and I love riding horses.
I'm Lexi and I love agriculture.
My name's Carter and I love eating.
My name's Chase and I love lifting weights.
My name's Summer and I love spending my parents' money.
I'm Dane and I love baseball.
Our show is about our blended, blessed, and always a mess life. And our hope is if you find yourself in the same situation we are in, that by sharing our story, all the fun and all the mess, the challenges we are experiencing, it will give you some inspirations, laughs, and community, knowing you are not alone in this mess.
We appreciate you spending time with us. Let's dive in.
This episode of Blended, Blessed, and Always a Mess is sponsored by the children's book Feathers Matter. As our kids grow up, they face challenges in their life, and knowing their self-worth and their value is crucial to face the headwinds. Purchase this beautiful story to read to your kids and grandkids and start the conversation with them at a young age. They are worthy, they matter, and their feathers matter. You can find the link to order on our Blended, Blessed, alwaysamess.com page. Mention code #blessed for an autographed copy. Welcome to this week's episode of Blended, Blessed, and Always a Mess. This is an episode that is truly almost 20 months in the making. And there have been days where we have had to be incredibly quiet and not talk about things that are going on in our lives. And then this week, it all comes to a head because we finally had the trial that Hallie Phillips needed and deserved. And that has been taking up so much space in our hearts and our bodies over the last several weeks.
I think it would be good to point out some facts around criminal cases because, like you and most of our listeners, I had zero experience or knowledge of our criminal side of the judicial system. Absolute no clue. Thank God. Previously, I was never had any experience. But I know a lot of people don't understand how it works. So I want to just do some myth busters out of the gate. In criminal cases, we, the victim's family, are not the ones that press charges. It's the state. So we don't decide to press charges criminally. We don't have our own attorney. We don't pick the attorney. We make zero decisions. Our role is to represent the victim's family. But we didn't choose to file charges against the defendant. We were only asked input around our opinions of something, but we do not make any decisions. The prosecutor's office makes all decisions.
And I would say that's such a crazy thing because people would ask me all the time and they would be shocked to find out we have nothing to do with any of it. So we lost a daughter and yet had nothing to do with anything. As you just said, we don't file the charges. We don't pick an attorney. We're literally we're along for the ride because we don't get to choose anything.
Right. When it happened, we didn't say, oh, hey, state of Missouri, you need to go prosecute this guy. They told us they were arresting him that night that she died because they were charging him with involuntary manslaughter in the first degree with an additional armed criminal action. This was not our choice. I would never choose to ever be in this effing situation ever. So just want to state that we've had people say different things or ask different questions, even like, well, does the victim's family receive money? No, like the state doesn't even receive money. Like it's criminal. Money has nothing to do with it. So just want to state that because a lot of people do think that somehow we were in control and we were in control of nothing and would never want to ever be in this situation.
No, or for any of you to ever be in the situation. It's awful because you're in the situation with zero control.
And that's fair to say. You're already grieving the worst possible loss in your life. And then on top of that, have to deal with this whole other layer that's messy and ugly and awful.
Yeah.
So I just want to state all that because I didn't know anything about the criminal side and just wanted to kind of state that initially. So to Eric's point, the trial was set up several times, rescheduled several times. Even last week, we weren't sure the trial was even going to happen because they schedule multiple trials a week, knowing that the majority of them settle. They don't make it to trial. And so we were not prioritized. So a criminal case was not the top priority. A civil case was. But it ended up towards the end of last week that one got thrown out, and then ours was bumped to the top of the list.
So all of a sudden we're in, and we're like, oh, whew, here we go next week.
All of a sudden we're in, it's going to happen. And then there was a plea offer from the prosecutor to the defense saying, we will drop the armed criminal action charge, which carries the heaviest weight in the involuntary manslaughter case. And it could be up to 20 years if you were convicted. But they offered to drop that if the defendant would go for a bench trial instead of a jury trial, which bench means that the judge makes the decisions. We found out on Thursday or Friday of last week that was extended and they accepted it. So then now we know it's going to be a bench trial on Tuesday.
And again, reiterate, we had nothing to do with any of that. We're just being informed what's happening.
Right.
Kind of crazy.
So the other thing I want to call out is people have said, well, he didn't do it on purpose. And I actually usually just want to say something really smart ass like, yeah, no kidding, because he's not charged with murder.
And that is the difference.
So involuntary manslaughter means that you did not intentionally kill someone, but you acted in a reckless or negligent manner that caused the death of a person. So just reiterate too, Hallie's death certificate says homicide on it. And a lot of times people equate homicide with murder. Homicide means you were killed by another person. So this criminal charge is not about whether or not he shot and killed her. That's not even up for debate. He shot and killed her. The charge and the trial was about at what level of recklessness or negligent, or he's found innocent. So just want to throw that out there too, as we gear up for the trial, just giving you a lot of context of what it looks like at that point.
And on our end, emotions are getting like higher and higher. You can just feel the stress level in our house, not just between you and I, but all the kids even. Like you could feel the stress. You could cut it with a knife.
Unbelievable, because you know at some point it's coming. It's been delayed multiple times. So there's always this question of, is it really happening? What will happen? It's traumatic in the courtroom. You know, it's like what they say.
Hatfields and McCoys. You got one side and one. Hatfields and McCoys. Our side on one and their side on the other.
Yeah, or wedding style. Got the boys' side on one side, the girls' side on the other. And it's very uncomfortable. It's stressful. And there's a lot at stake. And the night before the trial, I was really having a hard time. And I was so scared. I will be very vulnerable in saying I was so scared and afraid of what was going to happen in court. And I was very afraid for myself and my soul if it would be not guilty, because it truly feels like I have been fighting for Hallie and for her worth and for her life to have mattered, that as a mom, this feels like the determination of whether or not it mattered that she was shot and killed. And it's so hard even to this day to even say those words out loud because it still feels like it's not real. So then here it is the night before. And I ended up, well, I always take a bath when I'm like super stressed. And I reached out to Lynn Roush, who is licensed therapist. We've had her on our podcast. She's very, very smart lady, but also is a calming spirit. And so I just asked her, like, I need help armoring up. I need armor. How do I prepare myself to face this day and to be able to have the strength to take on whatever the result is? And, you know, she asked me, well, what are you feeling? Like, what are you afraid of? And I just said, I am so afraid that we will get a not guilty plea and it will crush me because I will feel like it didn't even matter. Oh, you know, well, shot and killed her. You know, it's all good. It's just an accident when she could still be here. It could have been avoided.
As someone that's been married to you and lived with you now for almost 5 years, I knew, like I was walking when you were taking that bath, and my prayers the entire time were, God, how do I handle this? Because one, I will lose my mind if it's a not guilty verdict, but my wife is going to utterly be crushed even more than she's already crushed if we do not get a guilty verdict, because this is a battle for Hallie's life mattering. I knew that. I knew it was going to be a soul-crushing defeat for you. And so then I get home and you're like, hey, I've been talking to Lynn, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, of course, Angie's armoring up. I should have known. I should have known that you were preparing, because that's how strong my wife is. I will say that. She is strong and smart, and she could feel where she needed help, and she reached out for it. So I was very proud of you when you shared that with me when I got home that night.
I would say when you have been in the darkest of dark places and you know you need to be pulled out of that hole, a lot of times you don't have any choice. Or I know I have learned that I have got to pull on that lifeline. And I do want to share what she had shared with me because it's such wise words. But she explained that we have sustained multiple moral injuries. So for one, the senseless, totally avoidable, unnecessary death of a piece of my soul that only mothers understand what that really is or how that feels. And then secondly, we have sustained the pain of a narcissist that is refusing to take responsibility for their actions. And there's that whole other layer that the hope is like, if a judge would rule guilty, then maybe that will ease that second injury. But there is nothing that will take care of that first injury of losing Hallie. So again, I'm like, okay, how would I heal from that second injury if it's not guilty? Her response was basically that when you interact with a narcissist type of personality, which typically is people that will not take any accountability for their actions, it's always someone else's fault, which, by the way, I've
ding.
No doubt I get blamed by the family for a lot. Somehow this is my fault that Hallie's dead. I have no doubt in my mind that that is their thoughts. It's like apologizing and taking responsibility is the very thing that would start to heal that wound. But typically that won't happen. Your power is understanding that person will never change and you should never hold out for an apology or taking ownership, that that's part of the mind game. And the only way to break free and start to heal is not having that expectation from that person that they would be remorseful. It's like waiting for a bus that will never show up, ever. And so it was like, okay, accepting who he is for what it is, that is how you start to kind of heal.
100%.
So that was the night before.
Advice.
It was great advice. That was the night before. We all felt completely sick. Felt like we've been fighting so hard for her life, and the amount of praying that we've all done, but this army behind us, it's unbelievable. Like, we felt it. We felt everybody praying so hard.
Other states, other countries. I mean, it was amazing. And a lot of it is you, the listeners that have picked up on this over the last 20 plus months. Could not be more grateful for so many people reaching out.
Yeah, the other thing I forgot to mention that I had to do the day before is I put together a seating chart, because the other crazy thing is that in this particular county, there's only one trial courtroom, and it's small. So we basically had 4 benches that fit 6 people comfortably. Ours, we had 7 or 8, 7. Aric and I were like on one butt cheek, basically sitting in the bench all day.
It was a long day.
Trying to figure out who could be in there. I mean, we had such an army of people, and I have a big family. Our family is big, knowing that some, people might have their feelings hurt, wanting to make sure that we were fair and try to navigate that. And the whole time I'm like, I should be planning a seating chart for Hallie's college graduation, or, a wedding, or whatever that looks like. And here I'm planning seats for her trial about her life. Just so
It was
surreal.
So messed up. So messed up.
So
I'd also say the amount of time that you put into that was impressive.
Well, I had to rework it. I mean, we didn't know how many people would fit in the bench.
Yeah.
So I had alternate plans in case, it didn't fit that many. It's just the things you don't think about. But I knew it was going to be stressful and overwhelming for everybody coming in that conference room. I didn't want people to have to figure out where they were going to sit, and have people sitting with different people that maybe they weren't comfortable with, if they got emotional, like all the things. And that alone was something.
It was heavy.
So we get there Tuesday morning. Trial starts at 9. We walk in there, sit down, and the defendant is sitting next to his attorney. And he has on a necklace that has a ring that he had given Hallie around his neck. And it's like he was kissing it. That's what we sat down to in the initial courtroom. And my kids were like, what is happening? They were disturbed by that. Well, I think we all were. But there's
I'm
so
just going to know
trauma.
that's the narcissist. That's the narcissist trying to get a rise, that I wasn't going to allow that. Like, I know that you don't care about that ring. And so you just want us to be upset. And so I'm not going to give you the satisfaction, is how I felt about it.
Definitely. I think, gosh, I don't even know what I would say the hardest part of the bench trial was, because all of it, I don't even know how to describe it. Like, we listened to the 911 call, listened to him doing chest compressions, listening to him say she was not responding, her fingers were turning purple, that she wasn't blinking anymore. I mean, you listen to replaying the moments you weren't with your daughter when she died, because she was gone for like 15 minutes, because The first deputy to arrive on the scene was 10 minutes away when he called 911. And when he arrived, then he started working on her. And I think he was the one that initially got a pulse. But at least 12 to 15 minutes had passed where she was not breathing, from what we could gather from the 911 call. We did have the kids step out for this whole part.
Yeah, we didn't want the kids to hear any of that. It was about 20 minutes long, and it was rough. That was really tough to hear all of that. But they had to do it so that they could hear things he said in the background that were incriminating. And so they had to show those things. So we had to sit there and take it. And I felt like we owed Hallie that. Like, all right, babe, I'm with you. We're going to sit here and we're going to hear the things we've never heard before. But it was excruciating is the best way to say that. They showed
the body cam footage of Deputy Rudiger that brought her back to life. That part, that video, I couldn't really see because the way the TV was angled, but I know it showed her face because he was right next to her trying to bring her back to life. Statements were made that he knew better. So that was the reason why they were playing that.
Yeah, I mean, he said, I've been around guns my whole life. I knew better than to pull the trigger. I mean,
yeah,
you're the one saying those things, man.
And then we had to listen to the coroner describe her injuries in detail. And then I think the worst part of it actually was listening to the excuses, the grasping at straws of trying to point fingers. So much to say, the closing remarks by the defense even tried to point it towards Hallie a little bit of like, well, she was talking to him while he had the gun and he was distracted. Okay. So
yet then turn around and say he didn't know where she was sitting.
Yes.
So in one breath, he was distracting her, but in the next breath, well, he didn't know where she was. Well, you just said that.
Yeah.
He distracted her.
What word did he use? He didn't have an appreciation for where she was sitting. And listen, we're talking about a mobile home. Last time I checked, the living room of a mobile home, and you're 5 feet away, you know where she's sitting. Yes. There's no way. That's reckless that you did not know where she was. You did not check the chamber of the gun, just assumed it was unloaded and pulled the damn trigger. That was the hardest part for me, is to listen to them try to justify how any of this was a complete accident without it being reckless.
I mean, he continued even in the closing statement to talk about, well, he's only 23. He actually hasn't been around guns that long. And they pulled his hunting certificate from the time he was like 15 years old. So he had been around hunting. And as he said in his first statement on record, he'd been around guns his whole life. He knew better. So it was all just like mixed matched, trying to piece together something. And we both know from the years we spent with the young man, like he believed he was a great hunter. He believed he was very good with guns. So for them to then try to make an assessment in the closing argument that he wasn't was laughable based on spending any amount of time with the young man. You know how he feels. He feels like he is a professional gunman. Like he feels good about himself.
Right. Because he was explaining to Hallie how the gun worked and then shot her.
Yes.
There's a little bit of
all things that we didn't have anything to do with. Those are all things that were said in court. And so it's all public record.
There's a little bit of a silver lining at the end of the trial day in that I've always wanted to reach out to Deputy Rudiger and thank him for bringing Hallie back, because we never would have had those 2 days had he not been the one that was there and could revive her. And so afterwards, I was able to give him a hug and thank him for his life-saving measures. It's hard to even call it that because she had no chance, but at the time, they it was life-saving in order for us to be able to crawl in bed with her and hold on to her so tight.
At the end of the day, what this became about was overall, as you said at the beginning, there was never a question of, did he pull the trigger and kill Hallie? Everyone knew that. It was he reckless and negligent? And so it comes back to, as we've discussed several times, the rules of gun safety.
Pretty simple. Treat the gun as if it's always loaded. Know your target, what's in front of your target, behind your target. Don't point your gun at anything you don't intend to destroy. Simple.
Don't pull the trigger.
And hey, maybe don't have a gun that you're trying to operate in your home. There's another idea. So we went home Tuesday night with no idea what would happen on Wednesday. No clue.
The judge called for 24 hours. He said, I'll give a ruling in 24 hours. You want to talk about a long ass 24 hours. Whew.
It was such a level of uneasiness. Like, it was a little bit of a relief that the trial was done. We didn't have to listen to any more excuses, but it was such a level of unrest that night. I did go to Jessie, my sister's hair salon. She did my hair because I was supposed to have a hair appointment on Wednesday, but then they scheduled the verdict readout on Wednesday. And so I ended up having a little bit of time to myself as I drove out to her place. And I literally prayed to Hallie and God my entire drive of like, help me be strong. Help me to handle whatever is decided on Wednesday. And what do you want me to do? Like, I constantly pray that, like, give me guidance, show me the way. And my mom ended up stopping by when I was getting my hair done. And of course, they were all there at the trial. No one has experienced anything like this before. And I just melted with my mom of like, I want my old life back. I hate all of this. I freaking hate it. And I can never get it back. And that part, it's like, whatever is decided, we're never getting our lives back the way that they were. I just, that night, prayed so freaking hard. So hard that I just wanted to be able to survive it. So Wednesday morning, I get up and I think I prayed so hard that I actually, like, I felt stronger Wednesday morning. Got up, I put good food in my body. I went and walked and listened to Christian music for 4 miles. Just walked and prayed and tried to just ground myself in trust. Washed my car. I had one of our podcast listeners reach out and recognize that it was Hallie's half birthday.
That made me feel a little better.
I'm like,
that made me feel a little better. I was like, all right, 7/17. So a lot of sevens with that.
Oh, I forgot to mention that when the trial started, about 5 minutes before the trial started, I had 4 or 5 people message me and say, oh my God, there's a rainbow outside. And it had not rained. Then it rained the rest of the day. So it was really weird timing.
Yeah.
So I did feel like Hallie was present, but that day went by so slow. Mm-hmm. And then it was at 2:30. We get there at 2:15. Really not much to talk about. Walk in there.
Nerves are going.
Sit down. I look at my Apple Watch and it's 140 beats per minute just sitting there before anything happened. And
I could hear my heart beating in my ear. You know that thing where I could hear it
pounding.
Like, oh God.
So the judge walks in. He says, all rise. And that basically there's 2 parties here and one will be disappointed. But this is a professional courtroom, and he didn't want any reactions from anybody. And he said guilty in the 1st degree of involuntary manslaughter. I mean,
I started crying.
I don't even know if I would call it crying, Aric. I feel like you were having convulsions of tears, and
it was so heavy. And she's like, get it together. I could not. I was just trying to breathe.
It was such a release of the unrest that we have had for so long, knowing she should be here and that no one was taking accountability for it. Like, oh, well, sorry, accident. And I think what I realized that I didn't know going into it, that
Is there a noise? Like I'm hearing something on your end, like a song or something.
what the hell? Why is music playing in here? That was weird.
Whose Alexa was that?
Summers. And it's like 27 seasons. It's a new Zach Bryan song. Yeah, sorry for the slight pause there because all of a sudden we could hear music playing and it was Summer's Alexa in her room playing a Zach Bryan song about 27 seasons.
Yeah,
and there's no kids here.
Now I want to go see what the song's about because it feels like Hallie's like showing up in the middle of the show.
What the heck? Well, what I was starting to say is that what I didn't realize was it's so hard to separate out what is causing all of the grief. Obviously, it's a no-brainer, right? It is the loss of Hallie, but like I mentioned earlier, there's two different layers to it. And how do you ever separate that out and really know your different components of grief? And so I've always said it feels like a herd of elephants on my chest. And I also feel like they're all tangled up. You don't even know how to start getting them off of your chest, right? It's just all so heavy. But the crazy thing is that I have always said that it doesn't matter the result, because I will walk into that courtroom feeling one way and I will walk out feeling the exact same way, because there is nothing that will bring Hallie back and it's unfixable. But there was such a layer of elephants removed from my chest that I had no idea what happened. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that as a mama, I've been fighting for Hallie for 5 years, not just the last 2 that she's been gone, but her whole life. He took her life before he actually took her life. And that was a fight I had for her worth and her value, and to be respected and appreciated and loved like she should. In that moment of the guilty verdict, that 5-year battle for her worth and trying to justify why she should be treated a certain way was done.
You say that so well, because we lived, and we always try to be very like on the up and up and only say things that are in court. And so we've had to really bite our tongues, keep our mouths shut for the last 20 months. But what you're saying is very true, in that Hallie was regularly not valued. And as we go on, we'll be able to share things that were in her phone. We're not going to do that today. But there were a lot of things that we've known for the last 20 months were even maybe worse than we thought, if I could just say that. And so knowing that if she really mattered or not, if she was worth it, was on the line in this, because nobody else could go through those messages and see all the things that we had seen, has a heavy, heavy weight. And so I remember both of us getting home and just being like, I had no idea I was going to feel this much better. Like, still massive grief and loss, but like you said, not all the elephants on our chest anymore. Now there was some room to breathe a little bit. You could breathe a little.
Right. And I feel like that has been transferred. Someone else can carry that weight of responsibility, because it's been validated by the Missouri Court of Law, or however you want to say that.
The state of Missouri says guilty.
You acted recklessly, and this could have been avoided had you made different choices. had you had appreciation for her life, not just the appreciation of where she was sitting on the couch? You lack that too.
I would say that is, in a nutshell, the overall microcosm that we're trying to get at, is that there was always a lack of appreciation for years. And so to finally have it validated by the court of law that you didn't just not appreciate what you had for several years, then you ended the most amazing thing that anybody could ever have in Hallie Phillips' life. That was a validation that our family needed to hear, that somebody would finally, even though they don't want to, would finally have to take responsibility for the actions that happened on November 27th and culminated on November 29th of 2022, and that have changed our family dynamic forever. Because no matter what happens from here on out, and it won't be the end of the world for that person, we're still going to serve a life sentence forever.
I cry for her every day, and I will always cry for her. Next steps. So I've had a lot of people ask me like, oh, is he in jail or whatever? No, he can go do whatever he wants, like he's been doing for the last 19 months. But there's a sentencing hearing scheduled October 1st. And then that will determine what happens next, and who knows how that will go. So more to come there. I just personally want to thank everybody that has prayed for us, that has supported us. I had a listener reach out and say that while she didn't know us or Hallie before they heard about our story, that because of the way that we talk about her and share who Hallie was, she feels like she knows her. And that was the best compliment, the best thing I could ever have heard. Mike, you just summarized my whole mission, is that Hallie's memory will always be kept alive, even by people that didn't know her. They, especially women, would feel a little bit more courageous to stand up for themselves, to know that they deserve to feel special. They're worthy of planning and intention and love that makes them feel like they're the best thing in the world.
So we will continue to keep you updated over the next several weeks before the sentencing, but we'll now be able to occasionally talk about what really happened to Hallie over time. And that'll allow other narcissists to lose their power. Because at the end of the day, what we're going to fight for the rest of our lives is that narcissism ceases to exist, which I know sounds funny or like impossible, right? But for us, that's our fight, is to prevent other people, whether that's a girl or a boy, from being in a narcissistic relationship that tears them down, pulls their feathers out, and tries to keep people from flying that you care about and that you love. For this week, for the first time in almost 20 months, we feel just a little bit lighter. And without all of you listening and all of your prayers and your support and your continued loving kindness and the words when we need them the most, we wouldn't have been able to make it through. And we are so grateful that God saw this case for what it was, that he was able to let the judge see this case for what it was, and that now everyone can see what Angie's always seen, that Hallie deserved more. We thank you for listening, being a part of our team, being a part of the Blended, Blessed, Always a Mess family. Have a wonderful week. God bless.
Thank you for listening to Blended, Blessed, and Always a Mess. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and at blendedblessedalwaysamess.com.
Reach out to us on any of our social channels. We would love to hear from you. Have a great week.